The morning sun blazed over Fort Carson, Colorado, turning the rifle range into a shimmering strip of heat and dust. Sergeant Diana Walsh stood at the edge of the crowd, her boots planted firmly in the dirt, watching as 32 of the best marksmen from bases across the western United States prepared for the annual precision shooting competition. At 42 years old, Diana had spent 20 years in the Army. Her dark hair, streaked with gray she'd earned through 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, was pulled back in a tight bun. Laugh lines creased the corners of her brown eyes, but today those eyes were focused and steady. She carried an M14 rifle, not the modern tactical weapons most competitors brought, not the fancy long-range systems with computerized scopes and carbon fiber stocks. Just a classic M14, the same type of rifle her father had carried in Vietnam. "You brought that antique," a voice called out behind her. Diana turned to see Captain Brad Morrison striding toward her, his expensive custom rifle slung over his shoulder like a fashion accessory. Brad was 35, blond, and walked with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. He'd made his reputation as a competition shooter, racking up trophies at civilian matches on weekends. In actual combat, he'd spent his deployments behind a desk at headquarters. "It's not an antique," Diana said calmly. "It's a classic." Brad laughed loud enough that several nearby shooters turned to look. "A classic piece of junk, maybe. What's that thing weigh? 11 pounds, 12. 9.5, Diana replied. "Still too heavy for precision work at distance." Brad stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to seem concerned rather than condescending. "Look, Diana, I respect what you did over there. Really, I do. But this competition is serious. We've got generals watching, sponsors. This isn't some feel-good participation trophy event." Diana's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. "I'm aware of what it is, Captain." "Then you know that rifle is going to hold you back." Brad gestured to his own weapon, a sleek bolt-action precision rifle that probably cost more than Diana's truck. Technology has moved on. That M14 might have been great in the 60s, but this is modern long-range shooting. You need modern equipment. "Or I need to know my weapon," Diana said. Brad smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sure, sure. Old school and all that, I get it. But when you're eliminated in the first round, don't say I didn't warn you." He walked away, chuckling to himself. Several other shooters had overheard the exchange. Some looked away uncomfortably, others smirked. Diana had dealt with men like Brad her entire career. Men who assumed that because she was a woman, she must have gotten where she was through some combination of luck and lowered standards. Men who'd never bothered to look at her service record, which included 3 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star she never talked about. "Don't let him get to you," said a quiet voice beside her. Diana glanced over at Master Sergeant Tom Chen, a wiry man in his 50s who'd been her spotter in Afghanistan. Tom had retired 2 years ago but still showed up to these competitions. He carried an older rifle too, though not as old as Diana's M14. "I'm not," Diana said. "Good, because we both know you can outshoot him with your eyes closed." Diana allowed herself a small smile. "Let's not get carried away." The competition director, Colonel Sarah Martinez, called everyone to attention. She was a no-nonsense officer who'd earned her position through 3 decades of exemplary service. Diana respected her immensely. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Martinez's voice carried across the range, "welcome to the 28th Annual Western Regional Precision Shooting Competition. Today, we're not just here to shoot targets. We're here to demonstrate the skill, discipline, and dedication that makes our military the finest in the world." She went on to explain the rules. The competition would consist of 4 rounds, each at increasing distances. Round 1, 600 yards. Round 2, 800 yards. Round 3, 1,000 yards. The final round for the top 5 shooters only would be at 1,200 yards. All shooting will be from standing position, Colonel Martinez continued. No bipods, no benches, no supports, just you, your weapon, and your skill. A murmur ran through the crowd. Standing shots at these distances were brutally difficult. Even at 600 yards, the slightest tremor in your muscles could send a round several feet off target. At 1,000 yards, you were fighting against wind, heat shimmer, your own heartbeat, and the simple physics of sending a small piece of metal accurately over more than half a mile. That's insane, someone muttered. That's the point, Colonel Martinez said sharply. In combat, you don't always get ideal shooting positions. Sometimes you take the shot you can get, not the shot you want. Diana nodded. She'd learned that lesson on a dusty rooftop in Kandahar when she'd had to make a shot that saved her entire squad. That was the day she'd earned her silver star. That was also the day she'd learned what she was truly capable of. The shooters drew numbers to determine their order. Diana pulled number 17. Brad Morrison pulled number 4. Perfect, Brad said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'll set the standard early. Give the rest of you something to chase. When Brad's turn came, he made a show of checking his rifle, adjusting his expensive scope and taking his time. When he finally fired his 5 shots at the 600-yard target, he placed 4 in the 10 ring and 1 in the 9 ring. It was an impressive performance, and he knew it. 49 out of 50, the range officer announced. Brad grinned and accepted congratulations from several other shooters. He caught Diana's eye and gave her a mock salute. Several more shooters took their turns. Most scored in the low 40s. A few managed 45 or 46 points. The targets seemed impossibly small through the heat waves rising from the desert floor. Then it was Diana's turn. She stepped up to the line, feeling the weight of the M14 in her hands. It was heavier than modern rifles, yes, but she knew this weapon like she knew her own heartbeat. She'd maintained it herself for 15 years. She knew exactly how it would react to wind, to temperature, to elevation. Diana brought the rifle up to her shoulder. No fancy adjustments, no prolonged setup. She found her breathing rhythm, the one she'd learned in sniper school 20 years ago. In, out, in, hold. The first shot broke clean. Through her scope, she saw the bullet punch through the target's center ring. 4 more shots followed in steady succession, each one placed with mechanical precision, each one punching through the 10 ring. 50 out of 50, the range officer announced. The crowd went quiet. Diana lowered her rifle, cleared it, and stepped back from the line. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just walked back to where Tom Chen waited. Perfect score, Tom said quietly. That got their attention. Good, Diana replied. Brad Morrison wasn't smiling anymore. He stood with his arms crossed, staring at the scoreboard where Diana's name now sat at the top. The 800-yard round began an hour later. The wind had picked up, swirling across the range in unpredictable gusts. Several shooters struggled, their scores dropping into the 30s. Brad managed a respectable 43, good enough to stay in second place. Diana approached the line again. The same calm focus settled over her. She'd learned to shoot in conditions far worse than this. Wind in the desert could change direction 3 times between heartbeats. You learn to read it, to feel it, to become part of it. 5 shots, 5 hits in the 10 ring. Another perfect score. Now people were starting to whisper. A perfect score at 600 yards was impressive but achievable. A perfect score at 800 yards, shooting standing in wind. That was something else entirely. Colonel Martinez watched from the observation tower, making notes. Diana caught her eye briefly, saw the slight nod of approval. The third round was where most competitions fell apart. 1,000 yards, more than half a mile. At this distance, you were calculating bullet drop, wind drift, air density. The target looked like a postage stamp through the scope. By this point, only 12 shooters remained. Brad Morrison was still in second place with a cumulative score of 92 out of 100. Diana led with a perfect 100. "She can't keep it up," Diana heard Brad telling another shooter. "Nobody shoots perfect at 1,000 standing. The physics don't allow it." But Brad didn't know about the rooftop in Kandahar. Didn't know about the insurgent commander who'd been directing mortar fire onto Diana's position from 1,100 yards away. Didn't know about the single shot Diana had taken, standing, with her M14, while her squad huddled behind crumbling concrete. Didn't know that she'd made that shot, in combat under fire, with lives depending on it. This was just a competition. Diana stepped to the line for the third time. The 1,000-yard target wavered in the heat. The wind had shifted again, now coming from her right at about 8 miles per hour. She adjusted her sight picture, controlled her breathing, let her mind go quiet. The first shot felt perfect the moment it left the barrel. Through the scope, she saw it strike center mass. 4 more shots followed. The range officer took longer this time, carefully checking each impact through his spotting scope. 50 out of 50, he finally announced. The whispers became audible gasps. Diana Walsh had just shot a perfect 150 out of 150 through 3 rounds, all from standing position, all with a rifle most people considered obsolete. Brad Morrison's face had gone from confident to angry. He stepped up for his turn at the 1,000-yard line, clearly rattled. His first shot missed the 10 ring. His second barely caught the 9 ring. By the time he finished, he'd scored 38 out of 50. He was still in second place overall, but the gap had widened dramatically. Only 5 shooters would advance to the final round. Diana, Brad, Tom Chen, and 2 younger soldiers Diana didn't know well. They'd shoot at 1,200 yards for the championship. As they prepared for the final round, Brad approached Diana again. His earlier smirk was gone, replaced by something uglier. "You know what I think," he said quietly. "I think someone's been feeding you wind calls. I think you've got help." Diana looked at him steadily. "That's a serious accusation, Captain." "Just stating what everyone's thinking. Nobody shoots that perfectly, not at these distances, not standing." "Maybe you can't," Diana said. "That doesn't mean nobody can." Brad's jaw clenched. "We'll see what happens at 1,200. That's where the real shooters separate from the lucky ones." He walked away stiffly. Tom Chen had witnessed the exchange. "Want me to have a word with him?" "No," Diana said. "I'll let my shooting do the talking." The sun was starting to descend toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the range. 1,200 yards, the final round, the championship. Diana checked her rifle one more time, running through the maintenance checklist that was second nature after 20 years. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. She'd been underestimated her entire career. By instructors who assumed she couldn't handle the physical demands. By commanders who thought she'd gotten her position through quotas rather than merit. By men like Brad Morrison who saw her gender before they saw her service record. She'd proven them wrong every single time. Today would be no different. Colonel Martinez called the finalists to the line. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "for our final round, each shooter will take 5 shots at 1,200 yards. This is the distance where skill, discipline, and mental toughness make all the difference. Shooter number 1, you may approach the line." The first young soldier, nervous and shaking slightly, managed only 28 points out of 50. The second scored 35. Tom Chen, steady as always, put up 42. Brad Morrison was next. Brad Morrison took his position at the firing line with deliberate precision, every movement calculated to project confidence. His custom rifle caught the late afternoon sun, all polished carbon fiber and expensive optics. He'd paid nearly $8,000 for the weapon, money well spent for a serious competitor. Or so he'd told anyone who would listen. The 1,200-yard target was barely visible, a distant speck against the desert backdrop. Even through high-powered scopes, it appeared as little more than a dark smudge dancing in the heat shimmer. Brad settled into his stance, feet shoulder-width apart, rifle tucked tight against his shoulder. His breathing technique was textbook perfect. He'd studied with civilian long-range shooting champions, attended expensive training courses in Wyoming and Montana. He knew the science of ballistics, could calculate bullet drop and wind drift in his head. What he didn't have was Diana Walsh's 20 years of combat experience. He didn't have her instinctive understanding of how a rifle becomes an extension of yourself. He didn't have her calm acceptance that sometimes, in the moment of truth, you had to trust your training and let go of the calculations. Brad's first shot cracked across the range. The spotter called out, "9 ring low left." Brad's jaw tightened. He'd been aiming dead center. The wind must have pushed it or he jerked the trigger slightly. He could recover. He had 4 more shots. His second shot felt better. Smooth trigger press, good follow-through. 9 ring high right. Damn it, Brad's frustration began to build. 2 shots, 2 9-ring hits. That was 18 points out of a possible 20. He needed 10s. He needed perfection to have any chance of catching Diana. He forced himself to breathe slowly. Relax, focus. The third shot. 10 ring center. Better, much better. Brad allowed himself a small smile. He could do this. He just needed to stay calm, trust his equipment, execute the fundamentals. His fourth shot went wide, catching the 8 ring on the left side. Brad cursed under his breath. That was a bad shot, a mental error. He'd rushed it, let his frustration affect his technique. 1 shot left. He needed a perfect 10 to salvage his round. Brad took his time, longer than necessary. He was aware of the crowd watching, aware of Diana Walsh standing behind him with her obsolete rifle and her impossible perfect score. This shot was about more than points. It was about pride. The rifle barked. Through his scope, Brad saw the bullet impact. 9 ring center mass. Brad lowered his rifle, his face flushed. 44 points out of 50. Not terrible, but nowhere near good enough. His cumulative score was 136 out of 200. Diana Walsh needed only 37 points out of 50 to beat him. She could miss the target entirely with 2 shots and still win. Brad cleared his rifle and stepped away from the line, avoiding eye contact with everyone. He'd been so confident this morning, so certain that his modern equipment and technical training would prevail. Now he was about to be beaten by a woman shooting a rifle older than most of the competitors. Final shooter, Colonel Martinez announced, Sergeant Diana Walsh. Diana stepped to the line carrying her M14. The rifle had seen better days cosmetically. The wooden stock bore scratches and dings from years of use. The metal showed wear marks where her hands gripped it thousands of times, but it was meticulously maintained, cleaned and oiled with the care most people reserved for precious heirlooms. Because that's what it was. Her father, Staff Sergeant Robert Walsh, had carried an M14 through the jungles of Vietnam. He'd brought it home, maintained it through 40 years of civilian life, and given it to Diana when she'd enlisted. She'd carried it through sniper school, through her deployments, through every moment of her military career when regulations allowed. The rifle held memories. Her father teaching her to shoot when she was 12, setting up tin cans on fence posts behind their Wyoming ranch. The first time she'd qualified expert marksmanship, the rooftop in Kandahar where she'd saved her squad. Diana brought the rifle up, feeling its familiar weight settle into her shoulder. She didn't need to check the scope setting or adjust anything. This weapon was calibrated to her body, her breathing, her heartbeat. 1,200 yards. The target wavered in the distance, almost invisible through the heat distortion. The wind had shifted again, now quartering from the left at maybe 10 miles per hour. The air was thinner here at elevation, which meant less bullet drop but also less stability. Temperature was dropping as the sun descended, which would affect powder burn rate and muzzle velocity. All these variables existed, all these factors to calculate and compensate for, but Diana didn't consciously think about any of them. 20 years of experience had made the adjustments automatic, instinctive. She felt the wind on her face, sensed the rifle's balance, knew exactly where the bullet would go. Her breathing settled into the rhythm, in, out, in, hold. The first shot surprised her, the way good shots always did. One moment she was aiming, the next the rifle was recoiling against her shoulder, the report echoing across the range. 10 ring center mass, the spotter called. Diana worked the action, chambering another round. The M14's semi-automatic capability was one reason she preferred it. Bolt-action rifles were fine for precision work, but they required you to break your sight picture between shots. With the M14, Diana could stay on target, make minor adjustments, and fire again without losing her rhythm. Second shot. 10 ring center mass. The crowd had gone completely silent. Everyone understood what they were witnessing. This wasn't just good shooting. This was something extraordinary. Third shot. 10 ring center mass. Brad Morrison stood with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. But his hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles had gone white. Diana's breathing never changed. Her stance never wavered. She was locked in now in that mental space where the world narrowed to just her, the rifle, and the target. Nothing else existed. Not the watching crowd, not Brad's skepticism, not the significance of the competition. Just the shot. Fourth shot. 10 ring center mass. One shot remaining. Diana needed just one more center hit to shoot a perfect 200 out of 200. 4 rounds, 20 shots, every single one placed in the 10 ring from distances ranging from 600 to 1,200 yards, all from standing position. It would be the first perfect score in the competition's 28-year history. Diana chambered her final round. The bolt locked forward with a solid click. Through her scope, the target seemed to come into sharp focus, the heat shimmer suddenly less relevant. She could see exactly where she needed to place the shot. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure, maybe 3. The M14's trigger had been worked over by a gunsmith her father had known, smoothed and adjusted until it broke like glass. In, out, in, hold. The rifle fired. For a moment, nobody spoke. The spotter was taking his time, carefully confirming what everyone already knew. 10 ring dead center, he finally announced. The crowd erupted. Soldiers were cheering, applauding, some actually whistling. Even the range officers were clapping. Tom Chen was grinning like a proud father. Diana safed her rifle, ejected the magazine, and cleared the chamber. She turned to face Colonel Martinez, who was walking toward her with something that might have been a smile. "Sergeant Walsh," the colonel said formally, "that was the finest display of marksmanship I've seen in 30 years of service. Congratulations." "Thank you, ma'am." Colonel Martinez lowered her voice slightly. "Between you and me, there are going to be some questions about your performance. Some people will have a hard time accepting what they just saw." "I'm aware, ma'am." "I assume your weapon is in full compliance with competition regulations." "Yes, ma'am. Standard M14, iron sights only, no modifications except for a trigger job done 15 years ago. Everything documented and approved." "Good, because I have a feeling Captain Morrison is going to request an equipment inspection." As if on cue, Brad Morrison approached. His face was carefully neutral, but anger simmered in his eyes. "Colonel Martinez," he said formally, "I'd like to file an official protest." The colonel's expression hardened. "On what grounds, Captain?" "I believe Sergeant Walsh may be using equipment that violates competition regulations. That rifle appears to have been modified." It's been documented and cleared, Colonel Martinez said coldly. But if you want to waste everyone's time with an inspection, that's your right. I do, ma'am. Diana said nothing. She'd expected this. Men like Brad Morrison couldn't accept losing to someone they considered inferior. There had to be an explanation, some technical advantage, some unfair edge. The possibility that she was simply better than him didn't compute. Colonel Martinez gestured to the range master. Conduct a full equipment inspection of Sergeant Walsh's rifle, everything by the book. The range master, a grizzled warrant officer named Jackson who'd been running this competition for over a decade, took Diana's M14 and carried it to an inspection table. He proceeded to check every specification: overall length, barrel length, trigger pull weight, scope magnification, even though Diana was shooting with iron sights. The inspection took 20 minutes. The crowd waited, the celebration put on hold. Diana stood calmly, her hands clasped behind her back. She had nothing to worry about. The rifle was completely regulation. Finally, Warrant Officer Jackson looked up. Rifle is fully compliant with all competition regulations. Standard M14, minimal modifications, all documented and approved. No violations. Colonel Martinez turned to Brad. Satisfied, Captain? Brad's face had gone red. I'd like to see her service record, verify her qualifications to compete. Now the colonel's expression turned dangerous. Captain Morrison, are you questioning Sergeant Walsh's credentials? I'm simply ensuring all competitors meet the requirements, ma'am. Sergeant Walsh has 3 bronze stars and a silver star. She's a distinguished expert in marksmanship and a qualified sniper instructor. Her credentials far exceed the minimum requirements for this competition. Now, unless you have a legitimate concern rather than sour grapes about losing, I suggest you accept the results and conduct yourself like the officer you're supposed to be. The rebuke was delivered in a calm voice, but everyone in earshot heard it. Several soldiers looked away, embarrassed on Brad's behalf. Brad's mouth opened and closed. Finally he managed, "Yes, ma'am, my apologies." He turned and walked away quickly, his shoulders rigid with humiliation. Colonel Martinez handed Diana a small trophy, a brass rifle mounted on a wooden base. "The championship is yours, Sergeant. Well earned." Diana accepted the trophy, feeling its weight. It was smaller than she'd expected, less impressive than the ornate cups and plaques she'd seen at civilian shooting competitions. But it meant more than any of those ever could. "Thank you, ma'am." The colonel leaned in slightly. "There's someone here who wants to meet you, General Hawkins from Special Operations Command. He's been watching the competition. I think you impressed him." Diana's eyebrows rose slightly. General Hawkins was a legend in Special Operations circles. He'd been a Delta Force commander before rising through the ranks. If he wanted to meet her, it meant something significant. "I'd be honored, ma'am." "Good, he's waiting in the observation tower. I'll take you up." As Diana followed Colonel Martinez toward the tower, Tom Chin caught up with her. "That was something special," he said quietly. "Your dad would have been proud." Diana felt a tightness in her chest. Her father had died 5 years ago, cancer from Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam. He'd never gotten to see her win this competition, though he'd encouraged her to enter every year. "Yeah," she said softly, "he would have been." The observation tower was a 2-story structure overlooking the range. General Hawkins stood at the window, watching the other competitors pack up their equipment. He was in his early 60s, lean and fit, with iron-gray hair and the kind of presence that made people stand straighter when he entered a room. "General Hawkins," Colonel Martinez said, "this is Sergeant Diana Walsh." The general turned and offered his hand. "Sergeant, that was remarkable shooting." "Thank you, sir. I've been reading your file. Afghanistan, Iraq, Silver Star for that shot in Kandahar. You've had quite a career." "Just doing my job, sir," General Hawkins smiled slightly. That's what everyone who earns a Silver Star says. Tell me, Sergeant, are you happy in your current assignment? Diana blinked. She was currently assigned to a training battalion at Fort Benning, Georgia. It was a good posting, important work training the next generation of soldiers, but it was also safe, predictable. It's a good assignment, sir. Important mission. That's not what I asked. Diana met his eyes. The general was testing her, she realized, seeing if she'd give him the answer she thought he wanted to hear or the truth. No, sir, she said honestly. I'm not particularly happy. I missed the challenge. Good. General Hawkins pulled out a business card and handed it to her. We're putting together a specialized training program for special operations snipers. We need instructors who can actually do what they're teaching, not just recite from manuals. People with real experience making real shots under real pressure. Interested? Diana looked at the card. It had just a phone number and an email address, nothing else. But the implications were clear. This was an opportunity to work with the best, to train elite operators, to get back to the kind of meaningful work she'd been missing. Very interested, sir. Call that number Monday morning. Ask for Colonel Peters. Tell him I sent you. General Hawkins glanced out the window at Brad Morrison, who was packing up his expensive rifle with jerky, angry movements. And Sergeant, don't let people like Morrison get to you. The military is changing. Not fast enough for my taste, but it's changing. We need more people like you showing what's possible. Thank you, sir. After the general left, Diana stood at the window, holding the business card and her small trophy. Below, the competition was breaking up. Soldiers were loading their vehicles, saying their goodbyes. Brad Morrison was nowhere to be seen. Tom Chin appeared beside her. So, what did the general want? Diana smiled. To offer me a job, I think. Damn, knew that perfect score would get attention. It wasn't about the score, Tom. It was about proving I could still do it, proving the old ways still work. Tom nodded at her M14, which she'd slung over her shoulder. That rifle's been good to you. It's been everything to me. Diana ran her hand along the worn wooden stock. My dad used to say that new gear is nice, but knowing your weapon is better. He was right. They descended from the tower and walked back to Diana's truck. The sun was setting now, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. It had been a long day, but a good one. As Diana loaded her rifle case into the truck bed, a young soldier approached. She couldn't have been more than 22, fresh-faced and nervous. Sergeant Walsh, the young woman said hesitantly. I'm Private Martinez. I just wanted to say, that was amazing, what you did today. Diana smiled. Thank you, Private. I'm a scout sniper candidate, going to school next month, and I was wondering. Private Martinez bit her lip. Do you have any advice? I mean, I'm the only woman in my class, and some of the guys, they don't think I can make it. Diana looked at the young soldier, seeing herself 20 years ago. Same determination, same fear of failure, same need to prove herself. My advice, Diana said, learn your weapon inside and out. Trust your training. Don't let anyone make you doubt what you're capable of. And remember that the loudest critics are usually the ones most threatened by your success. Private Martinez nodded, her eyes bright. Thank you, Sergeant. That means a lot coming from you. After the private left, Tom chuckled. You're going to be a legend after today, you know. Perfect score at the championship. People will be talking about this for years. I don't want to be a legend, Diana said. I just want to be a good soldier. Well, you're both, whether you want to be or not. Diana climbed into her truck, placing the trophy carefully on the passenger seat. Through the windshield, she could see the range where she'd just made history. 4 rounds, 20 shots, 200 points. Perfect. But as she drove away from Fort Carson, heading for her hotel, Diana wasn't thinking about the trophy or the perfect score or even General Hawkins' job offer. She was thinking about her father and the rifle he'd given her, and the faith he'd had that she could do anything she set her mind to. Diana's hotel room was a simple affair at a chain motel off Interstate 25, nothing fancy. She'd learned long ago that comfortable was better than impressive. The room had a decent bed, a working shower, and a small desk where she now sat, cleaning her M14 by the light of a single lamp. The rifle disassembled into familiar pieces: bolt carrier group, trigger assembly, gas piston. She'd performed this ritual thousands of times, could do it blindfolded if necessary. The movements were meditative, calming. Oil and cloth, removing the carbon residue from today's shooting, ensuring every part was pristine. Her phone buzzed, a text from Tom Chen: "You made the news. Local station did a story, you're famous." Diana didn't respond. She didn't need fame. She'd won the competition to prove a point to herself, not to the world. But the world apparently had other ideas. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Colonel Martinez. "Check your email, this is important." Diana set down the rifle parts and opened her laptop. Her military email inbox had exploded. 63 new messages in the past 3 hours. Most were congratulations from fellow soldiers. A few were from people she didn't know, shooters from other bases who'd heard about her performance. And one was from Major General Robert Krantz, the base commander at Fort Benning, where Diana was currently stationed. The subject line read, "Immediate return required." Diana's stomach tightened as she opened the message. "Sergeant Walsh, you are ordered to return to Fort Benning immediately. Report to my office Monday morning, 800 hours. This is regarding serious allegations that have been brought to my attention. Do not discuss this matter with anyone. Signed, M.G. Robert Krantz." Diana read the message 3 times. Serious allegations. What allegations? She picked up her phone and called Colonel Martinez. "I got it too," the colonel said before Diana could speak. "An official complaint was filed against you about 2 hours ago, alleging you cheated during the competition." "That's ridiculous. My rifle was inspected. Everything was regulation." "The complaint doesn't claim equipment violations," Colonel Martinez said carefully. "It claims you had advanced knowledge of wind conditions and target placements, that someone was feeding you information." Diana's blood went cold. "That's a lie." "I know it is. So does everyone who watched you shoot. But the complaint was filed through official channels, signed by a commissioned officer. It has to be investigated." "Let me guess, Captain Morrison filed it." "I can't confirm that officially, but yes." Diana closed her eyes, feeling anger build in her chest. This was how it always worked. When men like Brad Morrison couldn't beat you fairly, they tried to destroy you administratively. File complaints, create investigations, bury you in bureaucracy until your reputation was ruined even if you were eventually cleared. "What do I do?" Diana asked. "You go back to Fort Benning, you answer their questions truthfully, you let the investigation run its course, and you trust that the truth will come out." Colonel Martinez paused. "I'm going to file my own report supporting you. Everything I witnessed was legitimate, but Diana, this is going to get ugly. Be prepared." After hanging up, Diana sat in the dark hotel room, staring at her partially disassembled rifle. 20 years of service. 3 bronze stars, a silver star, a perfect combat record, and now some bitter captain was trying to destroy all of it because she'd beaten him at a shooting competition. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Diana drove back to Georgia early Sunday morning, pushing her truck hard across Texas and Louisiana. She made it to Fort Benning by Sunday evening, tired and wired on truck stop coffee. Her small house near the base felt empty and cold. Diana had never married, never had children. The Army had been her life, her family, her purpose. She told herself she was okay with that. Most of the time, she believed it. Tonight, though, she felt very alone. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Diana put on her dress uniform, the one with all the ribbons and badges. If they were going to question her service, she'd remind them exactly who she was. Major General Krantz's office was in the headquarters building, a place Diana had only visited a few times in her 2 years stationed at Benying. The general's secretary, a pleasant woman in her 50s, told Diana to wait. She waited an hour. When she was finally called in, General Krantz sat behind a massive desk covered with files and photographs. He was in his late 50s, overweight, with the look of a man who'd spent the last decade behind desks rather than in the field. "Sergeant Walsh," he said without looking up, "sit." Diana sat. "You've caused me quite a headache," General Krantz continued, still reviewing whatever file he was reading. "I've got a formal complaint, allegations of cheating, and now the press is calling asking about our champion shooter. It's a mess." "Sir, I didn't cheat. Everything I did was—" "I don't care if you cheated or not," the general interrupted, finally looking at her. "I care about managing this situation. Do you understand the difference?" Diana's jaw tightened. "No, sir." "The difference is that your guilt or innocence is less important than the appearance of impropriety. You shot a perfect score. Nobody does that. Now people are asking questions, and questions create doubt, and doubt damages the integrity of the competition. With respect, sir, questions should create investigations that reveal the truth. The truth is that I shot fairly and legally." General Krantz leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're very confident for someone in your position." "My position, sir?" "An enlisted soldier, past 40, assigned to a training battalion. Not exactly climbing the career ladder, are you? And now you've made enemies. Captain Morrison has filed an official complaint. His father, in case you weren't aware, is Congressman Morrison from Texas. The congressman is very interested in ensuring this matter is handled properly." Diana felt the ground shift beneath her. A congressman, of course. Brad Morrison hadn't just been some random captain. He was connected, protected by family power and political influence. "So what are you saying, sir?" Diana asked carefully. "I'm saying that we need to make this problem go away, quietly, efficiently." General Krantz opened a folder and slid a document across the desk. "This is a retirement packet. You've got 20 years in. You're eligible. Sign this, put in your papers, and this whole investigation goes away. You get your full benefits, an honorable discharge, and we all move on." Diana stared at the document. "You want me to retire?" "I want this situation resolved without dragging the Army through negative publicity. You retiring accomplishes that." "And if I refuse?" General Krantz's expression hardened. "Then the investigation continues. And investigations have a way of finding things. Maybe nothing related to the competition, but 20 years of service, there's always something. A missed deadline here, a minor regulation violation there. By the time we're done, your record will have enough questions to prevent any future advancement. You'll finish your career in obscurity, possibly with a letter of reprimand in your file." Diana felt cold fury building in her chest. This was a threat, barely disguised but clear as day. Retire quietly or be destroyed. "I need time to think about it," she said. "You have 24 hours, dismissed." Diana stood, saluted mechanically, and left the office. She made it to her truck before the shaking started. Not fear, anger, pure, incandescent rage at the injustice of it all. She'd played by the rules her entire career, worked harder than everyone else, proved herself again and again. And now some connected captain and his political daddy were going to end her career because she dared to win. Diana drove home on autopilot. She sat in her living room, staring at the walls decorated with unit plaques and photographs from her deployments. 20 years of memories, 20 years of sacrifice. Her phone rang, unknown number. "Hello? Sergeant Walsh. This is Colonel Peters from Special Operations Command. General Hawkins asked me to reach out about the instructor position we discussed." Diana had forgotten about that. The job offer, the chance to train elite snipers. I appreciate the call, sir, but I'm not sure this is a good time. I've heard about the situation at Bennying, Colonel Peters said. The investigation. It's a misunderstanding that's being worked out. Sergeant, I've been in the military for 30 years. I know a railroad job when I see one. General Hawkins does too. That's why I'm calling. Diana sat up straighter. Sir, we want you for this position. The instruction job is real, and we need someone with your skills. But more than that, we believe you're being treated unfairly. If you're interested, we can request your transfer to Special Operations Command immediately. Get you out of Fort Benning and away from General Krantz's jurisdiction. Can you do that? General Hawkins can. He's already made some calls. But Sergeant, you need to understand what you'd be walking into. This won't make the investigation go away. It'll just move the fight to different ground. Morrison and his father will push back. There will be congressional inquiries, possibly Inspector General investigations. It could get messy. Diana thought about General Krantz's retirement papers. The easy way out. Sign the forms, walk away, keep her benefits and her honor. Then she thought about Private Martinez, the young woman who'd approached her after the competition, the one who looked up to Diana as proof that women could succeed as snipers. If Diana retired now, what message would that send? That when faced with injustice, you should back down, that powerful men could always win if they pushed hard enough. I'm interested, Diana said. What do I need to do? Go to work tomorrow like normal. Don't sign anything Krantz puts in front of you. We'll have transfer orders cut by Wednesday. Until then, keep your head down and don't give them any ammunition. After hanging up, Diana felt something she hadn't felt in days: hope. The next morning, Diana reported to her usual duty station at the training battalion. Her immediate supervisor, Captain Rodriguez, called her into his office. Diana, he said quietly, I heard about the investigation. I want you to know I don't believe any of it. Thank you, sir. But I also want you to be careful. General Krantz is under a lot of pressure from higher up. Congressman Morrison is making calls. They want this to go away, and the easiest way to make it go away is to make you go away. I'm aware, sir. Good, Captain Rodriguez handed her a folder. This came for you this morning, looks official. Diana opened the folder. Inside was a notice that she was being placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation, effective immediately. They're sidelining me, Diana said. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. Diana spent the rest of the day clearing out her desk, handing off her training schedules to other instructors. By afternoon, word had spread through the battalion. Several soldiers stopped by to express support. A few avoided eye contact, already distancing themselves from someone who might be trouble. That evening, Diana's phone rang again. This time it was Tom Chen. I heard what's happening, he said without preamble. It's bull. Yeah. There's a group of us from the competition. We're putting together statements supporting you. Everyone who watched you shoot knows it was legitimate. That's kind of you, Tom, but I don't think statements from other competitors will carry much weight, especially against a congressman. Maybe not, but we can't just sit back and let them railroad you. After they hung up, Diana walked to her bookshelf and pulled down a photo album. Pictures from her father's service in Vietnam. Robert Walsh in jungle fatigues, young and lean, holding an M14. There was a particular photo she was looking for, one her father had kept on his desk until the day he died. She found it near the back. Her father's platoon, somewhere in the Central Highlands in 1969. They looked impossibly young, most of them barely 20 years old. Her father stood in the back row, second from the left. Diana had asked him once what it was like, being a soldier in a war that half the country opposed. He'd thought about it for a long moment before answering. You don't serve because it's popular, he'd said. You serve because it matters, because someone has to stand up and do the hard things. And when people try to tear you down for doing your duty, you don't back down. You stand firm. You trust that the truth matters more than politics. Diana closed the album. Her father had faced his own battles, both in Vietnam and afterward when he'd come home to a country that didn't want to honor his service. He'd stood firm. She could do no less. Wednesday morning, Diana's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Transfer orders approved. Report to Fort Bragg Monday. Peters. Diana read the message 3 times. Fort Bragg, Special Operations Command. She was getting out. She was about to call General Krantz's office to inform them when her doorbell rang. 2 men in civilian clothes stood on her porch. They showed badges. Army Criminal Investigation Division. Sergeant Walsh, the older one said, "We're here about the investigation into alleged irregularities at the Western Regional Shooting Competition. We need to ask you some questions." Diana stepped aside to let them in, her stomach sinking. This was escalating faster than she'd expected. The agents were professional but thorough. They asked about her rifle, her preparation for the competition, her interactions with other shooters. They asked if anyone had helped her, if she'd had any knowledge of wind conditions or target placements beforehand. Diana answered every question truthfully. No, she hadn't cheated. No, she hadn't received help. Yes, her performance was exceptional, but that's what 20 years of training produced. After 2 hours, the agents packed up their notebooks. "One more thing," the younger agent said. "Captain Morrison has provided testimony that he witnessed you receiving hand signals from someone in the crowd during your final round. Signals he believes were wind calls." Diana felt her temper flare. "That's a complete fabrication. Can you prove it? Can he prove I did receive signals? Because the burden of proof should be on the accuser." The older agent nodded slowly. "Fair point. We'll review the video footage from the competition. If there were signals, the cameras will show it." After they left, Diana called Colonel Peters. "They're investigating," she told him. "CID agents just left my house." "We expected that. Diana, I need to tell you something. This investigation isn't really about the competition anymore. Morrison and his father are using it as a platform to question whether women should be allowed in combat specialties at all. They're making you the test case." Diana closed her eyes. Of course. This was bigger than one shooting competition. It was about policy, about politics, about the ongoing cultural war over women in the military. "What do I do?" she asked. "You keep telling the truth, and you let us fight the political battle. General Hawkins has friends in Congress too. We're not going to let them destroy you. But Diana, you need to be prepared. This is going to get very public very fast." Colonel Peters was right. By Thursday morning, the story had broken nationally. Army investigates female sergeant for alleged cheating at shooting competition. The headlines made it sound like she'd been caught red-handed rather than merely accused by a sore loser. Diana's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, bloggers, veterans advocacy groups, everyone wanted a statement. She declined all interviews following Colonel Peters' advice. But the story took on a life of its own. Online forums debated whether her perfect score was possible. Some supported her, citing her combat record and experience. Others insisted it must have been cheating, that nobody could shoot that well, especially not a woman. The sexist comments were the hardest to read. Diana had dealt with discrimination her entire career, but seeing it laid out so nakedly on social media was different. Thousands of strangers who'd never met her, never seen her shoot, absolutely certain she must have cheated because women simply couldn't be that good. Friday afternoon, Diana received a call from an unfamiliar number with a Texas area code. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Sergeant Walsh, this is Congressman Morrison." Diana's hand tightened on the phone. "Congressman, I wanted to speak with you directly, soldier to soldier. I served myself, 20 years in the army before I went into politics." "I'm aware, sir." "Then you understand that the military runs on integrity, on trust. When that trust is broken, the entire system falls apart." "I haven't broken any trust, Congressman." "My son says otherwise, and my son is a decorated officer with an exemplary record. Now, I don't know you personally, Sergeant, but I know that sometimes good soldiers make mistakes. They get caught up in the pressure to perform, to prove themselves. Maybe they take shortcuts, accept help they shouldn't accept." Diana forced herself to speak calmly. "With respect, Congressman, your son's testimony is false. I didn't cheat. I didn't receive help. I shot a perfect score because I'm a highly trained sniper with 20 years of experience. So my son is a liar. Your son is a man who can't accept that he was beaten fairly." There was a long silence. When Congressman Morrison spoke again, his voice had gone cold. "I'm trying to offer you a graceful way out of this, Sergeant. Retire with your honor intact. Walk away. But if you insist on fighting, I promise you this, I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure the truth comes out. And I suspect that truth won't be as favorable to you as you believe." "Then I guess we'll see, sir." Diana hung up, her heart pounding. She just defied a United States congressman, a man with real power, real connections, the ability to make her life very difficult. But she'd also told the truth, and truth, her father had always said, was worth fighting for. The weekend passed in a blur of stress and insomnia. Diana spent most of Saturday cleaning her house, a nervous habit she'd developed in the army. When you couldn't control the big things, you controlled what you could. By Sunday afternoon, her small house was spotless, her rifle meticulously maintained, and her mind still racing with worst-case scenarios. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Diana loaded her truck with her gear and began the 8-hour drive to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The transfer orders had come through, as promised. She was officially out of General Krantz's jurisdiction. But the investigation followed her like a shadow. Fort Bragg was massive, home to multiple special operations units and tens of thousands of soldiers. Diana checked in at the Special Operations Command Headquarters building, where she was directed to Colonel Peters' office. Peters was a lean man in his mid-40s, with the look of someone who still ran 10 miles before breakfast. He stood when Diana entered and offered his hand. "Sergeant Walsh, welcome to SOCOM, have a seat." His office was surprisingly plain. No ego wall of photos and plaques, no fancy furniture. Just a desk, some chairs, and a single photograph of Peters with his team somewhere in Afghanistan. "Thank you for the transfer, sir," Diana said. "Thank the general. He went a bat for you." Peters sat behind his desk. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Sergeant. The situation is deteriorating. CID has expanded their investigation. They're interviewing everyone who was at the competition. They're reviewing years of your service record, looking for any pattern of misconduct. They won't find anything." "I believe you, but here's the problem. This isn't really about finding evidence anymore. It's about creating doubt. Morrison and his father are playing a long game. Even if you're cleared, the fact that you were investigated will always be part of your record. People will always wonder." Diana had already figured that out. "So what do I do?" "You do your job. Starting today, you're an instructor in our advanced sniper training program. We've got a class of 12 students starting Wednesday. Most of them are experienced shooters from various special operations units. You'll be teaching advanced techniques, long-range shooting, moving targets. Show them what you showed everyone at the competition." And the investigation continues, but here's where things get interesting. Peters pulled out a folder. The competition was filmed from multiple angles. Colonel Martinez kept copies of all the footage. We've had our intelligence analysts review every second of your shooting." Diana's pulse quickened, and there's no evidence of any signals, any help, any communication with anyone in the crowd. You shot independently, just like you said. The analysts are prepared to testify to that if necessary. For the first time in days, Diana felt something like relief. That should end the investigation. Should, but Congressman Morrison is pushing for a different angle now. He's claiming that your perfect score is statistically impossible, that the only explanation is equipment tampering or performance-enhancing drugs. Diana's relief evaporated. "You're joking." "I wish I was." He's demanding you submit to drug testing and that your rifle undergo metallurgical analysis to prove it hasn't been illegally modified. "I'll take any drug test they want. My rifle has already been inspected." "I know, but they'll keep moving the goalposts. That's how this works." Peters leaned forward. "Diana, I need you to understand something. This fight isn't about you personally. You're a symbol. The Morrisons are using you to make a larger argument about standards and qualifications. If they can prove you cheated, they can argue that women in combat roles are more likely to take shortcuts, to compromise integrity. That's insane. It's politics, and unfortunately it's effective. There are already opinion pieces being written, think tanks producing studies, all based on your case. You've become a flashpoint in a culture war you never asked to be part of." Diana slumped in her chair. "I just wanted to shoot in a competition." "I know, but here we are." Peters stood and walked to his window, looking out over the base. "General Hawkins and I have been discussing strategy. We think the best approach is to go on offense, stop defending and start attacking." "How?" "We want to hold a public demonstration. Invite press, invite members of Congress, including Morrison. We put you on a range and let you shoot under controlled conditions with independent observers. We show the world exactly what you're capable of." Diana considered this. "You want to prove I can replicate my performance." "Exactly. We remove any doubt. We show that your perfect score wasn't luck or cheating but skill, pure, demonstrable skill. And if I can't replicate it?" "Shooting perfect once is hard enough. Doing it again, under that kind of pressure with everyone watching. Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But Diana, I've seen your record. I've talked to people who have worked with you. You're one of the best shooters in the Army. I don't think you'll have any trouble proving it." The demonstration was scheduled for 3 weeks out, giving time to organize and invite observers. In the meantime, Diana had a class to teach. Wednesday morning she met her 12 students. All men, all experienced special operations soldiers, Rangers, Green Berets, SEALs. They eyed her skeptically as she introduced herself. "I'm Sergeant Walsh," she said simply. "I'll be your primary instructor for long-range precision shooting. We'll be working at distances from 800 to 1,500 yards. Questions?" A hand went up. Staff Sergeant Miller, a Ranger with multiple combat deployments. "Is it true you shot perfect at the Western Regional?" "Yes." "Is it true they're investigating you for cheating?" Diana met his eyes steadily. "Yes, and when that investigation concludes, they'll find exactly what you'll find in this course, that I know what I'm talking about because I've done it. Now, let's get to work." She took them to the range and started with fundamentals. Breathing, trigger control, sight alignment. Things they'd all learned years ago but needed refreshing. Then she moved to the more advanced concepts, reading wind at distance, calculating for elevation and temperature, understanding the ballistic arc of different ammunition. By the end of the first day, the skepticism had diminished. By the end of the first week, it had disappeared entirely. Diana wasn't just teaching from a manual. She was demonstrating every technique, making every shot she asked them to make, and usually doing it better. On the 8th day of class, she took them to the 1,000-yard line. "At this distance," Diana said, "everything matters, your heartbeat, the wind in your face. The temperature of the barrel, you can't force these shots, you have to feel them. She demonstrated, placing 5 shots in a group smaller than a dinner plate. The students were impressed, but Miller raised his hand again. Sergeant, at the competition you shot standing. We're shooting prone with bipods. Can you do what you did there? Diana smiled slightly. Want to see? She stood, bringing her M14 up to her shoulder. No support, no bipod, just her and the rifle. She fired 5 shots in smooth succession, all 10-ring hits. The students stared. How? One of them finally asked. Practice, Diana said simply. 20 years of it, now let's see you try. The weeks passed quickly. The students improved dramatically under Diana's instruction. Word spread about her teaching ability, and other instructors started attending her classes to pick up techniques. But the investigation continued. Diana submitted to drug testing. Blood, urine, hair sample. Everything came back clean as she'd known it would. Her rifle underwent analysis at an Army laboratory. The report confirmed what the competition inspection had shown: completely standard M14, no illegal modifications. Still, Congressman Morrison pushed. Now he was claiming the competition itself had been rigged, that Colonel Martinez had given Diana advance information. Martinez fired back with a strongly worded letter to the Army Times, defending the competition's integrity and Diana's performance. The story wouldn't die. If anything, it was growing. Finally, the day of the public demonstration arrived. Fort Bragg's main rifle range had been transformed. Bleachers had been set up for observers. News crews had cameras positioned at multiple angles. A panel of independent firearms experts had been brought in to verify everything was legitimate. And in the front row sat Congressman Morrison and his son, Captain Brad Morrison. Diana arrived early, wearing her dress uniform. General Hawkins met her near the firing line. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, Diana admitted. Good, means you're taking it seriously. The general gestured to the crowd, which was still assembling. We've got over 300 people here. Congressional staffers, military brass, journalists. This is your chance to set the record straight. No pressure, Diana said dryly. You can handle it. I've seen your record. You've made harder shots in worse conditions. The demonstration was structured simply. Diana would shoot at 4 distances: 600, 800, 1,000, and 1,200 yards, all from standing position. 5 shots at each distance. Independent observers would verify each impact. At 9 a.m., Colonel Peters called everyone to attention and explained the format. He introduced Diana, reading highlights from her service record: the Silver Star, the combat deployments, the years of experience. Brad Morrison sat stone-faced through the introduction. His father whispered something in his ear. Diana stepped to the line for the 600-yard shots. Her M14 felt comfortable in her hands, familiar as breathing. The crowd went silent. She'd done this before, she'd do it again. The first shot felt perfect, 10 ring. 4 more followed, all 10s. The crowd murmured. Diana moved to the 800-yard line. 5 more shots, 5 more 10s. Now people were leaning forward in their seats. The firearms experts were checking and rechecking their spotting scopes. 1,000 yards, the distance where she'd first proven herself at the competition. Diana settled into her breathing rhythm. The morning air was cool, with a slight breeze from the east. She adjusted her sight picture minimally. 5 shots, 5 10s. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were silent, watching something extraordinary. Finally, the 1,200-yard line, the longest shot of the day. Diana could see the target, a dark square against the backstop, but it looked impossibly small. She thought about her father, about the rooftop in Kandahar, about every young soldier who'd ever been told they weren't good enough. 5 shots, each one carefully placed. The lead firearms expert took his time verifying the impacts. Finally, he turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying across the range. "Sergeant Walsh has just fired 20 shots at distances from 600 to 1,200 yards, all from standing position. All 20 shots have impacted in the 10 ring. This is a perfect score, achieved under observation with independently verified results." The crowd erupted. Soldiers were on their feet cheering. Even some of the journalists were applauding. Diana lowered her rifle, safed it, and turned to face the audience. She found Congressman Morrison in the crowd. He wasn't clapping. Neither was his son. But they also weren't smiling anymore. General Hawkins approached Diana and shook her hand. "Remarkable shooting, Sergeant." Colonel Peters stepped to a microphone. "I believe this demonstrates conclusively that Sergeant Walsh's performance at the Western Regional Competition was legitimate and achieved through skill, not through any impropriety. I call on the investigators to close this case and clear Sergeant Walsh's name." A reporter shouted a question. "Congressman Morrison, do you still believe Sergeant Walsh cheated?" All eyes turned to Morrison. He stood slowly, his face carefully neutral. "I've witnessed an impressive display of marksmanship," he said carefully. "However, questions remain about the original competition. The investigation should continue until all facts are established." Another reporter. "What facts remain in question, Congressman? She just replicated her performance under observation." Morrison's jaw tightened. "The investigation will determine that." But his voice lacked conviction. Diana could see it in his posture, in the way he avoided eye contact. He'd expected her to fail, expected the pressure to crack her, expected to prove that her perfect score had been a fluke or a fraud. Instead, she'd done it again. The demonstration broke up slowly. Soldiers came up to Diana to congratulate her, to shake her hand. Several asked if she'd signed their rifles, which made her laugh despite everything. Captain Brad Morrison approached as the crowd thinned. Up close, Diana could see the conflict in his face. Anger, yes, but also something else. Maybe respect, maybe just resignation. "That was good shooting," he said quietly. "Thank you. I still think your rifle gives you an advantage, the semi-automatic capability." Diana looked at him steadily. "Captain, I could shoot perfect with a bolt-action too. The rifle isn't why I won. Training is. Experience is. You could have the best equipment in the world, but if you don't put in the work, it won't matter." Brad's face flushed. "I've put in plenty of work. In competition shooting, with all the time in the world to set up perfect conditions. No pressure beyond your ego." Diana's voice was harder now. "I learned to shoot in combat, where if I missed, people died. That kind of pressure teaches you things no civilian competition ever will. You think you're better than me because you deployed. I think I'm better than you because I am, and deep down, you know it. That's why you filed the complaint. Not because you actually believed I cheated, but because you couldn't accept losing to a woman." Brad's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Diana thought he might actually swing at her, but he just turned and walked away stiffly. His father caught up with him, and they had a brief, intense conversation before leaving together. 2 weeks later, the Army Criminal Investigation Division released its findings. After extensive investigation, including review of video footage, interviews with dozens of witnesses, inspection of equipment, and analysis of Sergeant Walsh's demonstration performance, they found no evidence of any misconduct or irregularities. The case was closed. Diana Walsh was cleared. Congressman Morrison issued a brief statement saying he accepted the investigation's findings, but maintained concerns about standards in military competitions. It was a face-saving gesture that fooled nobody. The story faded from the news cycle within days. People moved on to the next controversy, the next outrage. But Diana's life had changed. General Hawkins called her to his office a month after the demonstration. "I've got a proposition for you," he said. "We're standing up a new training program specifically for female soldiers entering sniper specialties. We need a program director, someone who can train the next generation and mentor young women facing the same challenges you faced. Interested?" Diana felt a smile spread across her face. "Very interested, sir." "Good. You'll keep your current teaching duties but add program development. Work with us to create the best training possible. Show everyone what's possible when talent meets opportunity." 6 months later, Diana stood on a rifle range at Fort Benning, watching Private Martinez and 15 other women qualify on their sniper rifles. The program she developed was already showing results. These young soldiers were sharp, dedicated, hungry to prove themselves. Just like she'd been 20 years ago. Private Martinez approached after the qualification. "Sergeant Walsh, I wanted to thank you for everything, for proving it could be done." Diana smiled. "You proved it yourself, I just showed you the path." That evening, Diana sat in her office, looking at the small trophy from the Western Regional Competition. Next to it sat a photograph from her demonstration at Fort Bragg, showing her at the firing line with her M14. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tom Chen. "Saw the news about your program. Your dad would be proud." Diana looked at the old photograph of her father in Vietnam, which now sat on her desk. Staff Sergeant Robert Walsh, young and determined, holding his M14. "Yeah," Diana said softly to the photograph. "I think he would be." She'd faced down the skeptics, the politicians, the investigators. She'd proven that skill and dedication mattered more than gender or politics. She'd created opportunities for the next generation. But more than any of that, she'd stayed true to herself. She'd refused to back down when backing down would have been easier. She'd stood firm in the truth. Her father had taught her that. The army had reinforced it, and now she'd pass it on to every soldier she trained. The trophy caught the light from her desk lamp. A small thing, really. Brass and wood, not particularly impressive. But it represented something larger. It represented every woman who'd been told she couldn't, every soldier who'd been underestimated, every person who'd faced injustice and refused to yield. Diana turned off her desk lamp and headed home. Tomorrow she'd be back on the range, teaching the next class. There was always more work to do, more soldiers to train, more barriers to break down. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She'd mocked her weapon choice. She'd mocked her ability. She'd mocked everything she represented.